May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our salvation. Amen. Love came down at Christmas, not as a mighty warrior king to set the people free from the Roman occupiers, not as version 2 of Elijah or Moses, not in the form of a man, but as a child who would need to grow and learn and get in trouble occasionally, just like every other child. And yet this child wasn't the same as all the other children, because this child was God. Not a part of God or a piece of God, but just God. On earth to live among us, to teach us, to show by example how we should live, and then finally to offer up his life for us. Yesterday we heard the story of the birth as told in the Gospel of Luke. We heard how Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem to be registered, how when they got there, there was no room at the inn, and so they took the only shelter they could find. That while they were there, Mary gave birth to a child, but not just any child. This would be a son who would sit on his ancestor David's throne to rule forever. She named him Jesus and laid him in the manger. We heard that some of the shepherds were told the good news by an angel, and so they traveled to see the newborn child. And finally, that the shepherds then returned to their home, glorifying and praising God. But today we get a different perspective. Today we hear that the child just born into this world has been part of the story from the beginning. Not as a human child, obviously, but as the Word that was made flesh, who was, we are told by John, with God in the beginning. And of course, these words immediately take us back to the beginning of the story, the beginning of creation as told in Genesis, just as it would have for John's audience. Clearly making the connection between Jesus and the God of Abraham. The Word, Jesus, what we refer to as the second part of the Trinity, didn't come into being when he became incarnate. And yet we celebrate his incarnation because this event changed our relationship with him. This was the inaugural event necessary for us to eventually get to Easter Sunday and to resurrection, to the promise that one day we will all live in eternal harmony in the very presence of God. And so we celebrate the birth of Jesus. But in that celebration, John tells us that we celebrate something else as well. We celebrate our birth as a child of God. John says in verse 12, "But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God." Now, I think the word power is probably not the best translation of the original text, at least in our understanding of the word. Power sort of indicates that we have to do something, whereas I think the text is really indicating that through our belief we are made into children of God. And so in celebrating the incarnation of Jesus, we are in a way also celebrating our inclusion in the eternal kingdom, our adoption into God's family as the brothers and sisters of Jesus. Love came down at Christmas, but not just in the birth of Jesus. Love was also born in a special way in each of our hearts at the same time. Last night, We sang Silent Night, while each holding a lighted candle. And I think that each of those candles, in some way, signifies the light that exists in each of us, the spark of the divine that burns brightly in all of us. And so we're called to live in that light, in that love, just as Jesus did. That's the real gift of Christmas, the living out of that love in taking care of those in our families and then taking care of those in our communities, making sure that God's love through us is made known not just in words, but in tangible ways as well. This morning, we take some time together as a community of God's children to celebrate and break bread. And then we take the rest of the day to rest, to celebrate the birth of Christ with those we love. But then tomorrow, just like the shepherds, we are to return to our own places, glorifying and praising God. We go back to doing the ordinary things that need to be done, but as changed people. We return to a world that today isn't full of love, isn't full of kindness, isn't full of hope, isn't full of patience, isn't full of peace. But we do so with a commission to increase each of those things as best we can. We return to the world to do the good that God has called us to do, to share with those around us the love that was freely given to us, and perhaps to rekindle the divine light in some others along the way. Because love may have come down at Christmas, but it's our job to help share that love with all of those around us the other 365 days of the year.